9th. We are in the Joe N. Idlette Junior Teacher Education Center, and this is the 2021-2022 final budget and millage rates agenda for the School District of Indian River County. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 5:01, and I would ask Dr. Jones to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Okay, this is not a typical board meeting. We do not have citizen input at the beginning of this meeting because this is the annual budget hearing. But we will have citizen input on opportunities throughout the meeting. We're now to the point where we're doing the adoption of the orders of the day. We do not have any consent items. May I get a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay. All right. And could we have a vote for the orders of the day?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it is 4-0. Mrs. Rosario is not here, I take it. Okay. All right, the purpose of the public hearing. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the board to adopt the millage rates and the final budget for the 2021-2022 fiscal year after receiving public input. Dr. Moore, you are recognized.
Thank you. As you just mentioned, that is the purpose for tonight's meeting. Advertisements have been placed according to the specifications of law. TRIM, which is our Truth in Millage, requires that the first issue we discuss at the public hearing is concerning the proposed millage rates for the fiscal year. By law, the budget is required to be adopted after the adoption of the millage and after the public input of our budget. After the consent agenda and the action agendas are approved, I will ask Mr. Fagan to review both the millage and the budget. So with the board's approval, I will turn it over to Mr. Fagan.
Thank you, Sue. To the chair. I'm going to discuss a couple items tonight. First off, before I get started, I need to acknowledge the hard working of our accounting staff. They've been working a lot of late nights, a lot of weekends. A lot of people were here over Labor Day weekend, and especially I need to acknowledge Mrs. Kim Coleman because of her dedication and persistence was essential to the completion of this work, as well as all the other accounting staff as well. For tonight, there are three items before the board. Approval of your final millage rates for 2021-22, approval of your final budget for 21-22, and approval of the annual financial report as of June 30th, 2021. This is the second of two required meetings to approve the district millage rates and the district budget. First meeting was held on July 27th, 2021. The advertisement for that July 27th, 21 meeting was published in the TC Palm on July 23rd, 2021. The notice of tonight's meeting was published and through a direct mailing from the property appraiser's office to all the homeowners in the form of a TRIM notice. TRIM is defined as truth in millage. The millage rates to be approved tonight are the same as the millage rates that were approved at the tentative budget. Required local effort of 3.520, basic discretionary operating of 0.7480, capital outlay of 1.50 mils, and additional voter discretionary of 0.50 mils. So once again, there's no change between the millage rates tonight and the millage rates from the tentative budget. Some budget highlights. There was no major or significant changes between the tentative budget and the final budget, but a couple of high points. One, total district budget is approximately $327 million, including all funds. This is a $3 million increase from the tentative, or 1%. General fund balance is approximately $25 million, or 15% of revenue, as compared to prior year $16 million, or 10% of revenue. The district still has received and will continue to receive the CARES ESSER funding, which is approximately $46 million. Some highlights regarding the budget for each of the funds. General operating budget is approximately $185 million, a slight increase of $3 million, or 2% due to year-end cleanup. Debt fund, $29 million as compared to $27, slight increase of 5%. This is because of an increase in your sinking fund requirements for your debt. Capital outlay, $55 million as compared to $54, $1 million increase or 1%, primarily because of year-end cleanup. Federal funds, $15 million budget compared to 18, a slight decrease of 3. This is because of the timing of the year-end process and the closing out of prior year grants. Food service, $8 million for the final, $7.8 million for the prior year, so a slight decrease there. Increase, sorry. Health benefits, $33 million this year. Tentative was $33 million, only a slight decrease of $500,000. Extended day, budget of $2.1 million, no change from the prior, from the tentative. In addition to the budget and the strategic plan, I want to acknowledge Dr. Jacobs for her leadership and assistance in preparation of, in the back of your executive summary, you have about 7 pages of where the budget is tied to the strategic targets. Without Dr. J's assistance, that would not have been accomplished. When you approve the items for to you tonight, the district will be in compliance with all Florida statute, Department of Revenue, and Department of Education requirements for the trim budget. Another item on the agenda tonight is your AFR for as of June 20th, 2021. The financial statements, as we call the AFR, consisted of 2 parts. First section is what we call government-wide, which is based on a full accrual accounting basis. The second part is what we call governmental funds, which is where each fund is listed and is segregated from all other funds, and reported on a modified accrual basis. Accrual basis, the main difference is revenues are recognized when earned, not when received, and expenses are recognized when incurred, not paid. For the accrual modified basis, which is what the district uses primarily on a day in and day out basis, revenues are recognized when they become available, and expenses are only recognized when they're incurred and paid. So a slight difference of the timing of revenue and a slight difference in the timing of expenditures. You say, well, why are we going through this, Ron? Well, infinite wisdom people smarter than me decided that, hey, when you're looking at a government institution such as the school district, and you look at their financials and you're looking at it on a governmental basis, they don't have a clue what your assets are. They don't have a clue what your long-term debt is. They're just seeing you got general fund of X and you spent Y and you ended in Z, and that's all they know. So they created this thing where we go in and we take all the assets and all the liabilities and all the expenditures and all the debt, and we create these conversion entries, which basically takes the district and compares it to a publicly traded company. So you got all your assets, all your liabilities, and your net position. So then someone could look at us and say, oh, let me compare this district to an organization that's on the New York Stock Exchange. In theory, that's the purpose of it. Some quick high points for the financials. Number 1, your total net position increased $3.5 million. That's a good thing. Your fund balances for all your funds, general debt, capital, etc., increased $13 million. That's a good thing. General revenue, your revenues increased $4.6 million overall. That's a good thing. And expenditures decreased approximately $4.6 million. Again, another good thing. That concludes my presentation. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, we are ready for discussion of the millage rates. Board members, would anybody like to bring up a discussion point?
Just one, Mr. Fagan. I thought the information in the handbook was excellent, and I'm always looking as a taxpayer, someone who's been here a while, and when you give the examples of the value of the home, what would the rate be, even with the discretionary that our taxpayers so graciously allowed us again for that special millage, you see there's not a lot of increase as far as from last year's bill to this year's bill. So I think it's very, very important that we note that. Again, that's on the value of the home and the property value. But again, with the special referendum millage, I am just so very grateful because this helps us a lot along with our CARES money, and I hope that it will continue because it's very, very important to this district. So that's one comment I wanted to make.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Sheff, you're good? Mr. Barefoot?
No, the only comment I would have is that we're fortunate to live in an area where home values, real estate values have increased. That certainly helps us, and to be able to maintain a flat millage rate and a nominal, almost not noticeable increase in taxes. Plus, I think the community is getting a good return on its investment going forward. And my congratulations to Mr. Fagan and his staff for being able to put such a budget together.
Mr. Fagan, just for, I think, the purposes of this meeting and also for transparency, could we tell the public what we spend the millage funds on?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. The Millage Fund is approximately $10 million a year that is raised through the .5 levy. Those funds are used for three different purposes. One, specialty positions such as reading teachers, art teachers, music teachers, PE teachers. It's also used for technology and also for some discretionary spending for the schools.
Yes, and I know board members in the past, we've talked about those teaching positions being taken off the millage and putting into the general budget. Dr. Moore, what is the status of that, and what are we looking at trying to be able to do that for the general budget?
Through the chair, that is a plan that we have over the course of the next 4 years. I think when Mr. Fagan and myself come in, adopted a budget that was dependent upon the millage, which is not a way an organization should be running, because it is not guaranteed funds. So as we went out, as Dr. Jones just referenced, and asked the voters to support us, and overwhelmingly that they did so, we made a commitment really to begin a transition to move that money, so if, God forbid, it wasn't renewed, it wouldn't break the back of the district. So this is an intentional effort through Mr. Fagan's leadership to continue to offset those funds to ensure that positions fall on funding that is available, generated through FTE.
Okay, so we're going to keep moving towards that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will be honest, Madam Chair, that's a big lift based on the way in which it was designed. But I think Mr. Fagan has shown that he can get it done.
Okay, and then the other one was, we mentioned technology is what we're using millage for, and we know that technology has been extremely important in this last year. What have we done for technology purchases then towards the millage?
Through the chair, technology, I think we've done some very, very courageous work. We've implemented a one-on-one initiatives both in our middle schools as well as our elementary schools pushed out this year, which really allows us to have technology in the hands of kids. It was sorely underused in terms of what we see in classrooms, and we really need to continue over the next several years to innovate what instruction looks like. So having devices in the hands of kids this year and then continuing that next year is that plan, and we have created a budget that allows us to renew those devices on a 4 or 5 year cycle, which ensures we don't end up, with old devices that can't be used. That structure wasn't built in the budget prior. So what would happen is you would have technology that we're putting in the hands of children that was absolutely not, it was foreign to them. I don't know how to use a mouse. A mouse is something that I haven't seen in forever because my current device, it's touchscreen, and touch the mic. So it's ensuring that we keep technology current, but also technology within the classroom. That really is our next step, really to ensure that we have innovative classrooms, technology being used by our instructors, just not overhead projectors, or using technology in its least form, but in its highest form. So
to me, a millage is above and beyond, so it's kind of a chance to do innovative things. And I know you said you've adopted the budget where it was using teaching positions and things like that. So moving towards innovation then, could we look at opportunities for spreading like wireless usage for our kids in our communities where kids don't have that access?
Oh, absolutely, and we've met that need. We met it out of a true need last year with the issuing of the hotspots, and we continue to provide those if that need be something that's needed. The devices were check in and check out over the course of the summer, so as we knew students would be going home for summer, that didn't mean we didn't want them not to have access. We continue to have checkout available. So we continue to really push around the area of technology in order to ensure that it is current for our students. And I am excited as to where we have grown over the last 18 months, but in no means do I think we are where we need to be. So I acknowledge there is additional work to do around the use of technology, ensuring that students know how to use it as a tool to access and build skill sets for themselves to be successful.
Yeah, I've heard of some innovative things, like a district just south of us was putting some wireless hotspots in some buses. And they were parking those buses in different neighborhoods at different times of the day. So I know that there are some kind of innovative programs out there that I think Millage would be good for. Dr. Jones?
Mr. Fagan or Dr. Moore, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our new SAM, the student allocation model, that's kind of helping us focus on where we need to go to absorb those positions if one day we don't have that millage, or it seemed more focused?
Through the chair, the school allocation model is the answer to that particular question. And we are transitioning into full enforcement of that school allocation model, and we're doing that to be in service of our teachers and in service of our students. So if we used a hard cap, meaning X number of students generate X number of teachers, it would be significant in terms of the change of practice and the allocation of the numbers of teachers. We are in a place within our budget where we don't have to lay off teachers. We don't want to do that. So we've created a plan over the course of time through natural retirements and separations that we can absorb those particular positions. One of the things that we did this year is move to that 8-period day. 8-period day is innovative. It is allowing students to have the additional courses. It's allowing them to have the enrichment and the remediation courses, not taking anything and giving them everything that they need, which is an additional cost to us, and some of that is absorbed through the school allocation model. But over the course of time, you'll see that allocation model as we become more skilled in really building master schedules based on the needs of students versus who's in our buildings. That's a big difference now. We're going to build schedules based on the needs of students. As an example, Mr. Meyer led a district team today looking at the CTE courses and going through a process which to determine, are the courses in high demand, meaning when they graduate or receive certification, there is a need for those particular skills. We have to justify that to the state, but more importantly, justify that to our communities, which means there may be additional programs that we need to add. We don't think we have to subtract any programs, unless Mr. Myers, but we have the opportunity on the 8, because of the 8-day, possibly to add and ensure that when a student enters a vocational program in our school, it does in fact lead to gainful employment in a relevant career that's not on the downside, but ultimately on the upside.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion items by board members?
Yeah, I have a question, but not on trim. Are we-
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. Right now is millage. Okay, so this item deals with the 2021-2022 proposed millage rates. Dr. Moore, have you documented that this public hearing was properly advertised in accordance with the state statutes?
Through the chair, I have.
Okay. We now recess this meeting to conduct the public hearing as advertised. The public hearing is now in session. Dr. Moore, are there any written responses to the advertised public hearing to be read at this time?
Through the chair, there are not.
Okay. The public is invited to address this issue at this time. You can only speak to the millage rates. Is there anyone or individual that is requesting to speak to the board? Seeing none, I will conclude that the public hearing has been conducted on September 9th, 2021, pursuant to notice, and that ample opportunity to address this issue has been provided to all. The board meeting is reconvened at this time. All right, the next item we have is the approval of a resolution 2022-03, adoption of the millage rates. Chairman will call for a motion. Could I have a motion, please, to adopt?
So move.
Dr. Jones?
Second.
Dr. Schiff? All right, I will recognize Mrs. Esplin for roll call.
Dr. Schiff,
Aye.
Dr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Berenborg,
Aye.
Mr. Barefoot.
Aye.
The vote came in at 4-0.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Esplin. All right, the next item is discussion of the 2021-2022 proposed budget. The chair opens the floor to fellow board members to speak to the budget at this time.
I don't have a lot to say. In part, I don't have a lot to say because the budget itself is so comprehensive. And because we've had so many previous conversations about this, that for those who can't see, this is what the budget book looks like. It's, how many pages total? 483. So it's a fairly thorough document. And because of the structure of how board members are now briefed, we have briefings on these prior to being here where we are able to get our questions answered and resolved. So most of that has happened. My only comment really are to thank you and your team and your staff, which you acknowledged, but on the thoroughness, on the comprehensiveness, and on the thoughtfulness that's gone into this budget. The only questions I have, which is not really specific to this budget, and if it's should be at a different time, that's fine, is the status of the ESSER funds and the CARES funding, which I know have been delayed. We got ESSER 1, I think we got some portion of ESSER 2, we're still waiting on ESSER 3, and I'm wondering if any of that has changed or been updated.
Through the chair, ESSER 1, yes, we've collected that. ESSER 2, we collected the advance of $6 million. We're still waiting on the second $6 million. It's been submitted to DOE, the applications, still waiting on a response. ESSER 3, there's been no communication.
Is that consistent with what's happening in other districts around Florida as well?
Correct.
Everybody has gotten then a portion of ESSER 2, waiting on the second part of ESSER 2, and no word on ESSER 3.
To my knowledge, yes. ESSER 3, definitely no one has received it, to my knowledge. They may have already received something. Their application happened to get in and get processed before ours. They may have received some, but
And we don't know where that is. We don't know if that's, where that's being held up or why.
through the chair, no, ma'am. As far as we know, the application has been sent. We received no communication back asking for any clarification, so we're assuming it's in the pipeline.
And the ESSER funding is related to, but not the same as any of the CARES Act funding that we've gotten, correct?
CARES and ESSER's kind of the same thing.
They overlap.
Yes.
But there's
They're
some
just
portions
different.
that we call CARES and some portions that we call ESSER,
It's
no?
all how you define it, like the ESSER 3, or what I call ESSER 3, is really the American Recovery Plan. It's got different terms, but it's in essence the same funding source.
Yeah. I think, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge, you stated in your opening comments, the kind of remarkable improvement in the stability of our budget, in the stability of our general fund, in our overall management of those funds and how that's happened. So I just want to acknowledge how much where we used to have to go out for TANs because we couldn't reach budget, we used to, our bond rating was down, which is now dramatically improved. All of these are indications of our stability and our ability to manage our budget in a way that was not happening prior, I think, to, may have happened at previous times, but certainly not when I got here and prior to your arrival. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and it's also attributed to my staff.
Always included in the acknowledgements. Thank you.
Dr. Jones or Mr. Barefoot?
I don't have anything other than to thank Mr. Fagan and his staff. I've looked at a lot of budgets over the years. As Dr. Schiff said, the weight of this budget alone is impressive, but it was a job well done, and I just say congratulations. I think you did a terrific job, and I don't have the history that Mrs. Barenborg or Dr. Schiff have, but the stories that I used to hear about the budgeting process and the expertise of the finance staff, that's a thing of the past because this is very well done.
Dr. Jones?
Just a few comments, thank you. Again, I really like that it's aligned to the strategic plan and we can see the funding in each of these areas. I think it's crucial that we do that. Some of the highlights that I saw, especially in the executive summary, the playgrounds and inclusive playgrounds, I think will be absolutely wonderful for our school district. Next 5 years, it'll be at the 14 schools, I believe. Very interested in seeing where we're going with our capital plan and what we're doing there. I'll be very, very excited. I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 2029 when we will have basically no debt, and we can use that capital money for capital instead of paying back the debt, which is something that I think is crucial for the school district. When I look at, just in general, I think it was 45% from capital outlay, so that concerns me. I'm glad that we are using money in the after-school program for the schools that have the after-school programs, and then it's going to the individual schools, so I'm very, very grateful for that, because we had quite a bit of money there. And I think one thing on the very beginning of the summary, it says, Mr. Fagan, we were held harmless for FTE reduction, 2% I think this year. How long do you think that will happen? Is that because of COVID and where we're going, or what is that looking like, especially when we lose those ESSER funds?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. That was only for last year. That was a
Okay.
one-time prize.
Okay. And one last thing, just in general for the schools and substitutes, and I was looking at the substitute fund. How's that going with the schools? I know right now, because of COVID, teachers are paid to watch other classes, but how is the school being charged for that?
Well, through the chair, the substitute fund is set up district-wide, so whatever the school needs is we fund. The charges, it doesn't necessarily go back to the schools as a
Okay.
hit.
So it doesn't really hit the school, they have so many, okay, that's really good. That's all for right now, Ms. Berenborg.
Okay. First of all, thank you for meeting with me and answering my several questions. You're right, I do have a little history with this as far as that goes, but it's interesting because when you're looking at a budget like this, you can't get, it's gray. And the reason why it's gray is because when you say, okay, how much does it cost per child at this school? And we went over that and we looked at general. And then you can't really look at what does it cost to educate a child that way, because there are so many factors. Whether or not a child needs extra help, whether or not a school needs extra personnel or whatever, those are all factors that you have to consider. So what I look at when I'm looking at this budget is what jumps out at me. And there were a couple things that jumped out at me, so thank you for answering all those questions. But there was a specific one that jumped out at me, and you know what it is, so I told you I was going to bring it up. Board members, if you'll look at the general fund in the back, when you're looking at, I think it's on page 135. When you go back and look at general fund for each school, this is basically, your FT money and how we generally fund schools. It doesn't count for all your title money and all your federal funds and grants and things like that. That is just your general fund. So when you're looking at general fund, you want to say, are we being equitable to schools? What is it costing us to run schools? Is it, and I'm looking at also the population of schools. So we see a couple of our schools are going way down in population. If you haven't seen that, look at that. The other concern I have was the one that is costing us so much, and the question is, what can we do about it? So if you look at, for example, there were a couple things that I asked Mr. Fagan to quickly calculate for me. For example, Vero Beach High School, if you look at the general fund there, it costs about $6,300 per child, or student, I should say, they're high school students there. If you look at Rosewood, it's about $6,400. So about, kind of comparable. If you look at page 142, Pelican Islands, $9,000 per child. So we're getting up there a little bit. Wabasso School, $18,000. But then again, Wabasso School is interesting. It's different. They will get lots of different funding, federal funding, to help offset that cost. So, again, that's a chance where you can look at, do we have a campus that has more higher student needs and things like that. But the one that kind of jumped at me was if you look at page 136, alternative ed. Alternative ed has 27 students right now. Now, I know that number changes. But last year, I think that the average was 40 or 41.
46 was the peak, I would say.
46 was the peak. So right now, we're sitting at $40,000 per kid. That number is, right, geez, it kind of jumped at me when I saw that. I said, what can we do to help that situation? How can we better handle how we're helping those kids and helping that school?
So through the chair, thank you for the question. It is absolutely a valid question, $46,000, and it is something that we looked at, and I'll be very honest, upon my arrival. This is a guy who was a counselor, was an assistant principal and a principal in an alternative school, and wrote a dissertation on alternative ed, if anyone cares to read it. So very passionate about that work. And the truth of reality is that is the last stop a child will have before he exits the system and not graduate. So putting systems in place to ensure that the appropriate social emotional support is there, the additional academic support to remediate wherever a child would need to get to in order to graduate. It is an expensive endeavor. But it is an endeavor that ensures that when we say all, we mean all. And, so alternative ed is a priority for this system. In looking at how it was designed here, my philosophy was the appropriate steps and actions were not being taken in order to ensure that alternative ed is, in fact, a last resort for children. So for a number of reasons, that being one, looking at the appropriate modification of behavior systems that are in school, the appropriate remediation, getting students back in class, quality instruction at the level the student needs it to be engaged, all of which keep children from going to the office to have the discipline record that would have them assigned to an alternative school. That results in the reduction of students going in there. But at the root cause of why the enrollment is so low, it has been because of the pandemic and the number of students that have been in school last year. We started with 62% of our students and only got ourselves to 85 over the course of the entire school year. In looking at that allocations, we've created additional assignments for the staff at ACE, and that is the ACE program. So under the leadership of Principal Brown, he's initiating a program that identifies students in 6th grade and 9th grade, which are the transitional years. Research is clear. Those are the toughest years for adolescents to find success because they're transitioning into new environments. We also have the data set through the leadership of Dr. McMahon that clearly identifies students who need that additional support. So I've tasked Mr. Brown in creating and leading that mentor program, which is the identification of mentors, the training of mentors, and supervising those students. Now, those students aren't in ACE, but the goal is to provide that additional support and advocacy and the monitoring of it being done by that school site. Ensures that they're working themselves out of a job. The second program is that when a student leaves alternative ed, the responsibility of the ACE team is not done. They go back on a 9-week basis or more frequently to review the progress of the student. The research is clear. My research through my dissertation is that a student, when in alternative ed, finds success. He finds success because all of the systems of support are there, the additional counselors, the small class size, the relationship because of the small class size. But within 18 weeks, they return to the same behavior and the same grades that got them into the alternative school. So this is an additional set of eyes that remain on those particular students that ensures that they continue to find that success. There is a transition program that's now in place led by Mr. Brown's team, which ensures that the appropriate courses are being taken, that the appropriate transition takes place. I'll give you an example. And it's kind of a harsh example, but let's speak the truth. Sometimes a student does things that result in an assignment to alternative ed. And when you return to alternative ed, you've done your time. You've learned from that mistake. You should be greeted back into that school site with a warm embrace and saying, congratulations on earning your way back, and not, oh, it's you again. So Mr. Brown is directly kind of making sure that transition takes place and then following up on those students and has the opportunity to connect back to me with those particular numbers. With those particular outcomes. So additional assignments have been assigned. The assignments we expect to go out, Ms. Dampier is also looking at it in terms of are there other opportunities with different kinds of exceptionalities to provide higher levels of support at that particular school if that school can provide it. So looking at the 46,000, I think that is a high number. I think that will be adjusted. But at the same time, we've provided additional assignments that ultimately keep students from getting into alternative ed, while at the same time exploring the model that's currently in place. And I will say, as uncomfortable as it may be, there's not too many districts of this size who have both a standalone ESC school and a standalone alternative school. We're probably the only ones that have 15,000 students that have two separate schools, one for alternative ed and one standalone for ESC. So those are things that we begin to explore on how do we get the most out of the dollars that we have while ensuring that we're being innovative in terms of the models of delivery to ensure student success.
And that's exactly what my thought is. I don't mind spending, it's 40,000, I think was the rough number that Ron gave me. And that's rough. But, I don't mind spending more per child if that's what the child needs. Obviously, we need to do whatever we need to do for kids to be successful. But when you see a number that's that much bigger, of course, it jumps out at you when you're looking at finance. And the question is, are there things that they're doing that the public needs to know? Like you said, they're going out back to the schools and they're providing that outreach. And those are things that don't show up on a spreadsheet, but are being done. And I think that's important that we voice that.
Thank you.
Dr. Jones?
I was at alternative school yesterday, and I will meet my mentee tomorrow. He's a 9th grade young man, and I was a principal at Gifford Middle when our alternative school opened, and to me it was great because the students weren't going to the streets, number one, and number two, I would meet with the principal, and however long they would be there, sometimes a semester, sometimes a year, our goal was to get that student back. And if we got that student back, it was successful. And Ms. Barrymore said it can be expensive, but what they're doing now there, and several people have taken on more than one role there, but what they're doing there is helping our students to really, really, be successful when they return to their home school. And I think it's worth every penny, but again, let people know what's really happening there, because that number will go up. That number will go up, and but the goal is, and then with Mr. Brown and his team going out to the high schools to make sure these kids are being successful, that's a piece we were missing. So that's good that we're doing that now. I really think that's good that we're doing that now. We want every one of our students to graduate, and we've got to catch them when we can. Thank you.
And through the chair, I know the number is 46, and I don't have the numbers here, but let me speak because the design or the model is the same as it was in Miami, where I was a superintendent or a principal of an alternative school. Our enrollment never exceeded 600, but over the course of the year, we serviced 1,800 students. And I'm sure the model is the same here. Those 46 come, they earn their way back, another 7 or 8 come, so over the course of the year, it's still gonna be low. Maybe it's 125, 130, those are estimates. But at the same time, so they're serving a ebb and flow of students, and if they're doing their job correctly, they're only serving those students one and finding that success.
Right, thank you. The other thing I wanted to point out, a couple of things, is this is the first time in a budget book where I've seen the legislative report attached to the back. And I don't know if board members, if you went through and read them, but basically these are the bills that were pertaining to school districts and how they would affect finance and how they would affect how we're going to fund the bill in the future. So I found them to be fascinating that they were back here and really interesting to be able to have as part of our budget book. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you for all your work for getting this thing together. I know the finance staff all works on it, but thank you, Ms. Copeland. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs, and thank you, Mr. Fagan, and you have a fantastic team, and they're not thanked enough. I know they've had turmoil in the past. It's nice to see that they're happy campers and together working hard for our district again. And they always have, but I appreciate all that they do. The book is well done. There are some concerns I have for individual little things like discretionary funding. I don't know, when I was a principal, I stayed in my budget, just saying. So it would be nice to see people not overspend, especially in their discretionary fund. That's all I'll say on that. Dr. Jones, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring my notes on this, Mr. Fagan, but are we going to be okay in transportation this year?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am, we've budgeted sufficient for the transportation, but of course, we're not fully funded by the state for it.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? We're good? Okay. So, Dr. Moore, have you documented that this public hearing was properly advertised in accordance with state statutes?
Through the chair, I have.
Okay. We are now in recess. This meeting is to conduct the public hearing as advertised. The public hearing is now in session. Dr. Moore, are there any written responses to the advertised public hearing to be read at this time?
Through the chair, not at this time.
The public is invited to address this issue at this time, can only speak to the budget. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the budget that has come before us today? All right, seeing none at this time, I'll conclude that the announced public hearing on September 9th, 2021 has been conducted pursuant to notice and that ample opportunity to address this issue has been provided to all. The board meeting is reconvened at this time. All right, next item, C, updated approval of resolution 2022-04 for adoption of final budget and adoption of the 2020-2021 annual financial report inclusive of cost report. Okay, I guess I will call for a motion.
So moved. Move to adopt the budget.
Second?
Okay, Mrs. Esplin, would you do a roll call, please?
Dr. Schiff,
Aye.
Dr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Barrenborg,
Aye.
Mr. Barefoot.
Aye.
The vote passes with a 4-0.
Thank you, Mrs. Esplin. All right, at this time, I have closing unless there are any other final comments.
Just thank you, Madam Chair. First and foremost, want to thank the board for your leadership. A budget of this magnitude, who it completely has been transformed over the course of the last 2 years, takes bold and courageous leadership. And thank each and every single one of you for your push, the level of questioning. I wouldn't want anyone in the public to think that these are the only questions that Mr. Fagan and myself have to ask. You are truly represented by 5 individuals who take a deep look at this budget, take it extremely serious, and hold our feet to the fire in order to ensure that it's aligned to the strategic plan, and then literally on a monthly basis making sure that we are funding that strategic plan and that we're maximizing the dollars. So I truly, truly appreciate it. Don't always enjoy it at times, but I truly appreciate it. To Mr. Fagan and his team, just absolute integrity. A man who is willing to do what is best for kids at all times, regardless of the amount of time that it takes, always advocating for his team and acknowledging his team. I've told many board members, I think I've probably told you all, that Mr. Fagan, Ms. Copeland literally spent the weekend here covering for some employees who had COVID in order to make this item happen. And I told Mr. Fagan I would come, but I would get in the way. So I was quickly dismissed when I did come. But it just speaks to the team that is in that office. And it's not the team that gets all the glory or the team that gets to see all the fun stuff that's happening in schools. But man, none of it would happen if it wasn't for you all. So thank you very, very much for your ongoing dedication. Always in there. You know, a lot of times you see they take a lot of walks.
I do see him.
I do see that happen.
Which is absolutely okay and encouraged. So, Mr. Fagan, team, thank you for your leadership and commitment to this board, to this district, and ultimately to our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. We appreciate all you do. At this time, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. It is 5:44.